So, I would argue that The Substance is one of those satirical body horror films. A movie that's not easy for everyone. It's a niche within a niche. And unless you can stomach Cronenberg, you won't get through this movie, especially not the third act. The final 20 minutes will test even the most battle-hardened moviegoers. But, let's start from the beginning. The movie opens with a Hollywood star being made for Elizabeth Sparkle. At the time, I'm assuming she was in her prime, but then we fast forward, and she's a former Oscar winner who is kind of down on her luck. She's considered washed up and relegated to only doing a weekly workout show. This beautiful woman made to feel inadequate due to some Hollywood asshole by the name of Dennis Quaid and his character Harvey, which, in retrospect, Chema mentioned maybe it's in relation to Harvey Weinstein, but let's just call them both assholes, right? Dennis Quaid. On her 50th birthday, Elizabeth Sparkle is fired from her show, losing it to someone who is, and I'm getting this from the line here, and I quote, young piece of ass. Yeah, that's a way to refer to women. This film feels like a raw examination, not just of yourself and your body, but really what's going on around you. Be warned, this is probably disturbing and uncomfortable for anyone with body dysmorphia. And it's this early on where I want to give credit to one Miss Demi Moore for putting herself so far out there in such a raw state. Looking into the mirror and hating what you see, those feelings of inadequacy. The eyeball scene, the fucking eyeballs are just terrifying. In her more quote-unquote beautiful, youthful state, she's redubbed as Sue. Now it's interesting to watch the dynamic of Elizabeth as her true self and Sue as this independent body person, whereas you're meant to be one. It's almost like unless you can find the balance between the two, one will end up killing the other, inevitably. Now at first I kind of noticed, and to some degree I understood, she seems to use a lot of her youthful time to experience things she hasn't been able to do in a very long time. She's stretching almost without popping. And I'm not that old, I swear, I'm only 30. But I can remember a time where I just could jump out of bed and I didn't feel my knees pop. Oh god, I'm getting old. Sue preps and prepares for her debut, but soon enough, she's back to being Elizabeth. Now, I hate the fakeness of Harvey. I want to point that out. I hate the fakeness of Harvey, aka Dennis Quaid, as a bigwig Hollywood executive who uses people, and once he's done with them, he tosses them aside. Now, I'm not sure how much of that is overblown versus what is actually inspired by real people, but I am willing to bet it's a lot more like reality than anyone cares to admit. Now, I'm going to say something, and I'm not trying to come off as trying to mansplain, I'm just talking when I say this. I feel like Elizabeth would be happier if she had some time for herself and worked on some other passions, finding painting, reading, podcasting. When you're on that level of success and then you just stop, you need a way to occupy your time. And bear in mind, she's only 50 years old young. She's not old. If she wants to relax, great, good for her. But if she's anxious to relax, she needs to seek help and work on exploring her own personal interests, in my opinion. Now, at this point, it's the second time that she is Sue when the breaking really begins to happen. And it seems like Sue and Elizabeth are slowly becoming different people. Also, the parts where we see how much she is ogled by men of the opposite sex, guys, don't be assholes, don't do that. Elizabeth inevitably seals the old version of herself in a closet and starts to separate herself from her older version. The divide is beginning to happen. Now, when Sue is slow to switch the bodies, Elizabeth wakes up with a noticeably aged finger. Without exception, they are supposed to switch at the right times. When Elizabeth sees Sue on TV, it's weird, almost like she doesn't recognize herself. Like she doesn't remember doing that. It's odd, but I like it. Elizabeth calls Fred, an old classmate that she ran into earlier in the film, to go on a date. She seems like she's about to take a moment of happiness for herself, the way we see Sue. But instead of focusing on what she is, she focuses on what she isn't. She skips out on the dinner with Fred and resigns herself to staying at home and eating her feelings. When they swap back, Sue takes more and more time. She's given the chance to host a massive New Year's party event. She takes it, but there are a number of consequences, namely, she takes more and more time from Elizabeth. When Elizabeth does inevitably wake up, she finds her left leg, her arms, half of her face aged into that of a withered old hag. She is torn into halves, almost, and the effects, I just want to say, are incredible. The aging makeup, like chef's kiss. It looks legit. I also love the Demi Moore breakdown here. It's so miserable. To see a person reckon with aging and the aging process in such a practical fashion, it's scary. Unless you have others around you to help you, but Elizabeth is alone in more ways than one. Sue ends up going off the deep end and ends up sequestering Elizabeth into the closet and sucks out all the possible fluid. We fast forward 3 months. Sue has a boyfriend and is on the verge of hosting this New Year's show, but she's out of stabilizing juice. She has 2 choices. Either switch back so that more juice can be made, or die. Bear in mind, when you don't switch back to the original body, it ages in a grotesque manner, and that's after 1 day. Imagine 3 months after the switch. Elizabeth is pissed, resigned to killing Sue and living out the monster as she sees herself. However, at the 11th hour, Elizabeth tries to swap back with Sue to keep her alive. With both parties awake, the two fight for dominance, with Sue getting the best of it. There's this gruesome and somber moment where they are both looking into the mirror. Elizabeth looks at Sue with envy, while Sue holds nothing but stupid, youthful age. Elizabeth is now dead, and Sue is breaking down, literally pulling out her own teeth with no effect. Her ear comes off, her nails are coming off. It's body horror in a way I've never seen before. When Sue tries to pull in Elizabeth and tries to inject and make more of herself, what comes out, a clone of a clone, a half-life. It's clear, and worse. A copy of a copy will never work. We see this grotesque monster with Elizabeth as part of it. It's horrifying in so many ways. This other version, the monster, has a full psychotic break and actually covers its face with a picture of a youthful Elizabeth, and oh man, it's depressing in more ways than you can ever imagine. Elizabeth walks down the hallway alone, wishing it was enamored by positive praise, but instead, the people of Hollywood are forced to reckon with the monster that they helped to will into existence. And I remember one time I was discussing the positives and negatives of aging, being old versus being young, and with experience, and I remember my dad said, if you took the mind of a 40-year-old man and put him in the body of an 18-year-old kid, he would be dangerous with all that experience and all that time. This almost feels like a halfway mark, where you would imagine if Elizabeth, all that she knows from the age of 50 and putting that into a younger body, imagine how far she could go. But alas, they're 2 different personalities. And this movie ends on a sad note, with Elizabeth being reduced to almost this puddle, this goop, trying to get back to her star, trying to just have her one moment of validation. And just like that, she's gone. The question of immortality, or in the very least, being yourself again, being young again, and trying to balance out your 2 worlds. This film is grotesque, hard to watch, and is actually worth a watch, if for no other reason than to question what is youth versus age and experience. This film, I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. It's not bad, not by any stretch of the imagination, it's a hard lesson to watch. A great movie, mind you, but this is not an easy viewing. That said, what did you think of The Substance? And